The boy was beaten up and robbed. He could only run away, but then he encountered a vampire, and died after being drained of blood by the vampire. The whole incident started with his friend didn't go to the movies with him. Because of this, the boy harbored hatred towards his friend. Even if he turned into an evil spirit, he would never let him go. The boy's friend is named York. At this moment, his motorcycle broke down on the road again. Fortunately, his home wasn't far from here. He got off and started pushing the motorcycle. The neighbor's older sister teased him, but he flirted with her instead. Coincidentally, his mom saw this scene. York argued back. He was just reading that line, but his mom reminded him not to forget that he had a girlfriend, especially Amy. Such an outstanding girl. York felt even more embarrassed. He could only lower his head and busy himself to make his mother stop worrying unnecessarily. Seeing his motorcycle broke down again. Right at that moment, Amy drove up and stopped in front of York. She smiled and invited him to get in the car, but just as York was about to act tough, Amy simply drove away. York realized that he still had classes today. He hurried and ran after her. Amy was just teasing him. She stopped not far away and waited for him. Meanwhile, on the other side of the town, the boy heard the dogs barking loudly in the room. He quickly ran over to check. Inside the bedroom, both parents were killed, and their throats were torn open. There were no signs of intense struggle at the scene. What exactly was it that could kill two adults swiftly? Before he could think much, he heard footsteps again. Clearly, the killer hadn't left. The boy quickly hid under the bed. He reached into his father's pocket beside him and pulled out a handgun. Under the bed, he loaded bullets into the magazine. Right at that moment, father's body suddenly disappeared, leaving behind a pool of blood. Stimulated by the blood, he dropped a piece from his hand, and it rolled right into the bloodstain. He wanted to quickly retrieve it, but a pale hand picked up the piece first. It was definitely not a human hand. The handgun without the missing piece became useless. The boy knew he was doomed. He hid under the bed, praying. The pounding of his heartbeat became the countdown to his death. The next moment, the entire bed was lifted. A figure stared at him. The boy was dragged away and became a meal for the monster. In the school classroom, the teacher was taking attendance. But recently, more and more students were absent. A third of the entire class is missing. But he didn't say anything, because strange things have been happening in the town recently. People have been disappearing one after another. The police are also helpless in dealing with it. After class, Ed invited York to watch a movie together. He initially wanted to refuse, but Ed had something to blackmail him with. A bunch of his embarrassing photos. If York didn't want to be ridiculed for stepping into school tomorrow, then it would be best to go tonight. York could only compromise. He didn't want Amy to know about those foolish things. Returning home after school, York's mother is chatting with the new neighbor, Jerry, but the atmosphere is a bit hot. Jerry is only wearing a vest. His muscular physique is perfectly displayed. His handsome face exudes a mix of hormones. York thinks he ruined his mom's good chance. Amy is also teasing on the side. Their presence quickly made the mother calm down. She just said the drainage was broken, and asked the neighbor Jerry for help in fixing it. Seeing the look in York's eyes, Mother and Jerry both interrupted him. That's how the topic ended. But the two of them exchanged glances. Both of them noticed everything. After seeing Jerry off, both of them started teasing. This conversation didn't last long. York was reminded by Ed. Only 10 minutes left. His embarrassing photos would appear on the school forum. There was no other choice. He could only rush over. Finally arrived within the limit time. The meeting place Ed arranged wasn't at his own house. It was at the house of the missing friend. Just in the past few days, their entire family went missing. Even the police were helpless. Ed claimed to know the culprit. It was the new neighbor of York, according to Ed, and he said he had video evidence. York believed that Ed must be crazy. He had just interacted with that man. He thought he was handsome and charismatic. His demeanor and speech were polite. He must be a well-educated person. How could he be the culprit of the serial disappearances? York saw in Ed's backpack. All of them were hammers and chisels. York couldn't help but doubt. Why would he carry so many weapons? Ed gave a perfunctory explanation. That Jerry is a vampire. He carries them for self-defense. All of this can be proven through videos in his house. York's suspicion grew even stronger. Why did the other person keep insisting on going to his house? The more he doubted, the more York felt that Ed was suspicious. Finally, he even said that Ed watched too many movies and had been brainwashed by those things. This is reality, not the movie Twilight. Vampires don't exist at all. Anyone who believes is a fool. And then he walked away without looking back. Unable to convince York, Ed went back home alone. He was robbed on his way back. His backpack was stolen. While fleeing in panic, he happened to stumble into Jerry's house. Seeing the food delivered to him, Jerry smirked sinisterly. Looking at that malicious smile, Ed quickly took out a crucifix pendant, but it was just a small pendant. It couldn't stop Jerry at all. Just like when the great demons descend upon the mortal world, the most important symbol is an inverted cross. Even Jesus had to carry the cross and run. The next day, York noticed that Ed was also absent from class. He remembered what Ed had told him last night. Doubts arose in his heart. Could it be that what he said was true? So, after school, he decided to visit Ed's house and investigate. From Ed's parents, he learned that Ed had left early. So, how could he be absent from school? York made an excuse to go upstairs and look for books. Searching for new clues, it was here. He saw the evidence Ed mentioned. There were several video recordings. The vehicles were self-driving in the videos. The trash cans would tip over automatically. It looked very eerie, but the audio inside said, "He is right there, clearly visible, but not visible in the recordings." York also saw the vampire information Ed had collected. It clearly stated, vampires cannot be reflected in mirrors. In an instant, he completely believed there really was a vampire living next door. York, who knew the truth, rushed back home. He happened to encounter Jerry. Knowing the other person's true identity, York's voice trembled, but he remembered what Ed had said before. Vampires must obtain consent to enter someone's home. So, York quickly entered the house. Jerry noticed the other's reaction, and guessed that he already knew his identity, but he wanted to test it by complimenting the home decor and offering helpful statements, trying to gain permission to enter, but York always hurriedly refused. He even quickly withdrew his hand when passing things. This unreasonable attitude clearly showed York's stance. Jerry knew there was nothing he could do for now. He could only leave a few harsh words, warning him to watch out for Amy and his mother. The threatening tone in his words was evident. Then he left. After seeing Jerry off, only then did York remember. He had a date with Amy tonight. So, he rushed upstairs. After meeting Amy, they started passionately kissing. In the heat of the moment, York suddenly felt something was wrong. It turned out Jerry was downstairs, staring at his room, being targeted by this guy. Almost instantly, he jumped back suddenly, trying to escape the other's gaze, but his unusual reaction made Amy feel like York was brushing her off. She angrily grabbed her bag and left, and that became a rift between them. York couldn't sleep until midnight. He had long experienced the terrifying nature of women. He wondered how to comfort Amy tomorrow. When he was in distress, a piercing scream pulled him back from his thoughts. He looked toward the source of the sound. It was actually coming from Jerry's house. Since he already knew something was wrong with the other person, York seized the opportunity to find the police and investigate Jerry's background. However, due to the recent string of disappearances, the police obviously didn't want to stir up trouble. They just asked Jerry a few perfunctory questions. They didn't even enter the house, and concluded that everything was fine, and left immediately. Seeing the police being unreliable, York was also disappointed. Indeed, relying on heaven and earth was not as reliable as relying on oneself. Taking advantage of Jerry's absence, York learned on-site lockpicking skills in an attempt to open Jerry's door, but clearly, he didn't have that talent. In the end, he relied on the spare key placed in the yard to enter. However, shortly after he entered, Jerry returned. If Jerry caught him, he would certainly meet a fatal end. York hid inside a cupboard. To his surprise, he discovered a secret passage. From there, he arrived at the basement and saw the person imprisoned by Jerry. He wanted to show off the lockpicking skills he just learned, but then he heard Jerry's footsteps. He quickly hid in the nearby empty room. Through the crack in the door, York witnessed a horrifying scene. Jerry bit through the woman's neck. Blood splattered all over the floor. The woman's voice faded away as she pleaded. When Jerry left, York went over to check again. He discovered that the woman was still alive. He decided to rescue her. So, while evading Jerry outside, they slowly approached the main door. But they didn't know Jerry had already noticed them. He was playing a cat-and-mouse game with them all along, deliberately letting them out of the house. Now it was already morning. The woman thought she was about to start a new life when she saw the sunlight, but as soon as they stepped outside, there was a sudden explosion, and she turned into ashes, completely disappearing from the world. Jerry, who was watching all of this from the room, revealed a smile. He enjoyed the thrill of tormenting others, witnessing the woman vanish in an instant. York also became wary of the sunlight. He hid in the room, blocking out any trace of light, not letting even a ray of light through. He couldn't figure out how to deal with Jerry. The gap between them was too significant. It really feels like a game of cat and mouse. York can only be Jerry's plaything. The only thing I can do is to prevent his mother from interacting with Jerry, and certainly not invite him inside. However, York's mother just thinks he's mentally unstable, driven by fear of Jerry. York searches online for ways to deal with him. That's when he comes across a name: Vampire Hunter Pete. He sees a glimmer of hope. He takes a flight to find him, but upon arrival, he discovers that this Pete is just an actor. Everything is just part of a script. He's not even as good as a magician, even though Pete is a fraud. His collection is genuine. York wants to seek his assistance, but all he offers are foolish suggestions, like turning vampires into giant egg rolls. Pete cuts him off, and has his assistant kick him out. York, with no gains from the encounter. Once again, he faces the onset of dusk. There's no good solution. York can only rely on divine intervention. He returns home. He starts making crosses. The entire room is filled with crosses. On the other side, Jerry, who has been waiting all day. First, he kills 2 people on the street to satisfy his hunger. Then he heads straight to the next door. Upon hearing Jerry's voice, York is terrified out of his wits. He pleads with his mother not to let Jerry inside. Jerry, outside the door, naturally hears, but he only smiles. He retreats into the shadows. Just when everyone thinks he's leaving, unexpectedly, Jerry starts digging in the yard. It turns out that after all the helpfulness over these days, he has learned the pipeline routes in York's house. He accurately digs out a gas pipeline. He guides a flame along the pipeline, causing a direct explosion. Of all the gas appliances in York's house, the entire house is blown apart. With no home left, there's no need for permission. Jerry calmly chases after the 3 of them. He even performs a strong brick-throwing act. He throws York's dilapidated motorcycle several hundred meters, smashing it into their car. The 3 of them press the accelerator to the floor, but they find Jerry standing in front of them. They steel themselves, and crash directly into him. But Jerry is completely unharmed. He even lies beneath the car, and punches through the chassis, holding down the brakes, then flips the entire car. These are things beyond human capability. Only now do York's mother and Amy believe that Jerry is a vampire, but it's already too late. They have nowhere to retreat. They can only face him head-on. York takes out the cross he made, hoping to intimidate him, but Jerry just smiles. He grabs the cross directly, and burns it to ashes. Jerry grabs York directly. Luckily, York's mother pierced Jerry's body with a road sign, saving York. York unexpectedly receives a call from Pete, who wants to help him voluntarily. Before they can start discussing the details, Pete receives a call. A late-night delivery arrives at the door. York casually remarks that they don't deliver packages at night where he's from. They should really learn from here. Before he can finish, Pete realizes something is wrong. At that moment, Ed, who has turned into a vampire, enters. He casually mocks them, calling them idiots. Before he can even make a move, Pete runs away. Ed quickly chases after him. Not only does he fail to catch up, but he also gets his arm caught in the door. On the other side, with Ed chasing Pete, York and the other person try to take the opportunity to escape, but they are cornered by Jerry, who arrived from downstairs. To save their lives, they pick up nearby objects and fight. Amy fires several shots at him, but she is told that silver bullets are for werewolves. Then she splashes holy water at Jerry, but that's for demons. It doesn't work on vampires. However, they manage to escape during this brief opportunity. Just when they thought they had escaped, and weren't happy for a moment, they are scattered by a crowd. When they meet again, Amy has already been turned into a vampire. Jerry turns back and mocks York, saying he can't protect anything, and can only watch the people around him die. York became furious, and sought out Pete. He obtained specialized tools to counter vampires from Pete's numerous collections. Afterward, they prepared themselves and set off. Taking advantage of the daylight, they broke into Jerry's house, but there, he encountered Pete. They were about to engage in a fierce battle. In the next moment, they were overwhelmed by a group of vampires, gasping for breath under a sliver of sunlight. Watching as the sun gradually set, their fate of death quietly approached. It was now their last chance, and if they didn't give it their all, they would have no opportunity left. York sets himself on fire. He tackles the opponent without hesitation. The fire seems to have no effect on him. Jerry, who was tackled by him, has a painful expression on his face. He crashes around with York. He wants to throw him down. During this time, the flames melt his skin, revealing a fatal spot, his heart. Taking advantage of this opportunity, York stabs him with a wooden spike. Jerry instantly explodes into countless pieces. The people he controlled also return to their original state. The film ends here. The film Fright Night is a 2011 movie. It is adapted from the 1985 version of the film Fright Night. From a Western perspective, it tells a humorous story of battling supernatural creatures and upholding righteousness. It provides viewers with a unique viewing experience. It is an excellent light comedy horror film, perfect for relaxing and watching during leisure time. That concludes the story for this episode. Rated out of 10 points. What score would you give this film? Please leave your answers in the comments section. If you enjoy my channel, please consider subscribing.